Hello everybody. How are you doing today? Because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do dried, seasoned, current tomatoes. I'm going to put them on a pizza so that you can see what you can do with dried tomatoes. And you can put them in a dehydrator, you can put them in an oven. You don't necessarily have to leave them out in the sun. I know if I did that, I would probably draw every single insect in the entire county to my garden. So I'm not going to do that. But let me go on ahead and put you on hyperlapse while I potentially find a tomato hornworm and pick off these tomatoes for us to turn into dried tomatoes so that we can use them on our pizza. Okay? Here we go. Alright guys, so now we're inside. I'm going to show you how to preserve these current tomatoes and turn them into basically sun-dried tomatoes, just without the sun. If you wanted to do this method and put them out in the sun, you can totally do that. I would recommend putting some sort of mesh screening over the top so that the bugs do not get to them. But if you do not have a dehydrator, I have a dehydrator that I'm going to be using and doing this with. But if you don't have one, you can definitely put these in the oven on a baking sheet at your lowest setting. Depending upon the size of your tomatoes, anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes. You just kind of have to watch them. It'll be based upon your tomato size, how small you cut them, and etc. But all I am literally going to do is de-stem them, okay? Slice in half, put them on my little drying sheet here. Then what I'm going to do is just sprinkle on top with some salt and pepper, add a little bit of dried basil on top, obviously that I've got crushed up and ground, just sprinkle it all over the top. I'll show you that bit here in a minute. And then I leave all of these going on my dehydrator for about 7 to 8 hours. Take them out, put them in a baggie, top with a little bit of olive oil, and I put them in the freezer to use later. If you're doing the oven method, you can definitely have these guys the same day for your pizza, but I've actually got some already done and in olive oil that we'll use on the pizza later today. And then if you're also not wanting to use any plastic, you can put these in a glass jar and do the exact same thing, top them with oil, and you're good to go. I've got a bunch of dried basil here, so I'm just gonna crush this up. And there's plenty of juice on these guys here that the leaf herb is going to stick just fine. Same with salt. I'm not worried about salt sticking. Salt's gonna stick just fine. And you can even opt to leave these unsalted. If you have somebody who's really sensitive to salt in your household, you don't even necessarily have to use salt. If you want to add a little bit of crushed red pepper, you can add that in. You could put some garlic. I'm not going to worry about that because when I'm physically cooking, I usually end up using garlic, so I don't need it here. But you do you. You can completely adapt this to you and your family. If you don't like basil, don't use it. You can use sage, oregano, marjoram, thyme, anything in there. Give them a little bit of a toss. Okay. Now, at this point, it's good to go. I just need to stack it up with my other layers here and turn on the dehydrator. And like I said, 7-8 hours, I will have some nice dried tomatoes. I'm going to go on ahead. I'm going to get these guys going, and I've got an as standard order to pick up. And then when I come back, we will work on making a pizza with some dried tomatoes that we have preserved actually from last year. And you'll get to see how that turned out, okay? Okay guys, definite outfit change here. Sorry about that, but went and got the as standard order, and even though it's cooled down, being on that pavement was really hot. So showering was necessary, which is okay because we're gonna have a official Friday night pizza and movie night. Very rare that I do that. I usually do breakfast on Fridays, but in this case, I'm wanting pizza. I've got my pizza dough is all ready to come out. So I'm gonna go on ahead and I'm gonna put you on hyperlapse for this portion. I'm basically just gonna be pulling it out, breaking it into the chunks that I need, and letting it rest for about 20 minutes before we go to spread it out in our pans to start cooking, okay? Let me get you on hyperlapse. Alright guys, so at this point I have actually pre-put these into the oven, and obviously I'm kind of doing personal pan size pizzas here. This actually is going to work out better for me personally because tomorrow I'm going to be out in the garden, and usually after I'm done being out in the garden and it's lunchtime, I'm starving, but I really don't feel like cooking anything for myself. So having two separate ones is just gonna work out beautifully, to be honest. So this is an example of an oil-packed tomato group from last year. And then you guys will have remembered the pesto recipe. So for the sake of this video, I'm doing this to show you how I am using what we are preserving here on the homestead. One of these guys, I've actually got a black creme tomato that I'm going to put on top, but for the sake of this video and for you seeing the relevance of what we are doing here, I'm going to be doing one with these sun-dried and oil-packed tomatoes from last year. So for us, it ended up being more practical, instead of putting them in jars, to put them in freezer baggies, lay them flat, and we could layer them up in the bottom of our freezer. So we started doing that instead of putting them in here. That's just a tip and option. For those of you who are packing, if you do opt to do this in a jar, what the oil packing does is it creates an oxygen seal. And I'll actually need to top this off with a little bit more. You want a good, at least ½ inch over the top of what's in the jar, just to help keep out any mold growth. So I just topped that off, put that back on, and I can throw this into the refrigerator at this point. Fresh tomato here from the garden. I am literally using odds and ends. I actually enjoy fresh tomato on my pizzas, not like jarred, diced tomato. It's not the same thing. I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. I've got a few leftover random sausage crumbles, and this is just going to be to up the protein a little bit. So literally my Friday night dinner is just going to be made up of what I have on hand. Okay guys, so I hope this video at least inspired you a little bit and maybe gave you some ideas that you can adapt for you and your family where you are as far as garden to table goes. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of ingenuity, and granted, when you are cooking with what you have out in the garden, sometimes you don't have what a recipe calls for, I guess you could say. Sometimes you just have odds and ends things and you wonder what to do with it, or you prep something that you did bring in from the garden and it was months and months ago and you haven't used it and you don't know how to use it. So I hope this kind of gave you an idea of what you could do with sun-dried tomatoes. My favorite thing also is to toss them into a pasta side dish. Roasted, sun-dried, dried, oil-packed tomatoes are amazing with a lemon butter sauce. You could even use the pesto if you like, and you've got a side dish right there that is going to be really, really tasty and also filled with a bunch of nutrients for you and your family. There's so many different options. Sometimes you just have to get creative and play with it and put things together that maybe you wouldn't have thought to put together to begin with. But that's kind of part of learning to urban homestead. So I'm gonna go on ahead and sign off. I hope you enjoyed this video. Go on ahead and subscribe. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. And I will see you guys on the next video. So as always, keep it simple, natural, and essential. Bye, guys.